Hello and welcome to the AI Pathfinder for Private Equity podcast. My name is Steve Budd and I'm on a mission to help private equity firms go from AI curiosity to confident action by building a network that shares what's working, what's not, and how to unlock meaningful value with AI. On this mission, I'm meeting some brilliant people who approach AI from diverse perspectives with domain expertise that private equity can greatly benefit from. Today, we're focusing on a topic that every PE firm and PortCo cares about: forecasting. It's a critical input for board reporting, growth plans, and ultimately value creation. And getting it wrong can kill confidence or momentum fast. Joining me is Dan Thompson, CEO and co-founder of Kluster. His company specializes in what they call private equity grade forecasting, helping PortCos gain earlier and more accurate visibility of their top line. Welcome, Dan. Thanks so much for sharing and sparing the time to talk to me.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
Good stuff. Well, look, first off, can we just give the listeners a bit more background? I did give a little intro, a sneak preview, I suppose, there, but a little bit more on yourself, your background, and the story behind Kluster, and really, why did you decide to go deep into forecasting?
Sure thing. So yes, I'm co-founder and CEO of Kluster. My background, I'm a theoretical physics graduate. My first role was at Actress, an insurance technology, a SaaS platform in the very early days of SaaS. I was a data analyst / data engineer there, I guess, for a few years. And then I moved into the insurance and reinsurance market, and I was working as an actuarial consultant for insurance and reinsurance companies. So my job would be to go into these companies across the Lloyd's of London insurance market and essentially build them forecasting models to get the coverage they needed for normally large unpredictable events like natural catastrophes, marine aviation disasters, civil war, pandemics, etc. And so I'd build the large forecasting models and make them as flexible as possible because they've got many different use cases. Some of it is for pricing the risk and pricing the financial products you're selling, essentially. And then there's the other side of it, which is regulatory risk for reporting to the Bank of England, etc. So I was doing that for the best part of a decade, I guess. And while I was doing that role, I was talking about forecasting. I was someone who was a very successful sales leader. And he mentioned that while he was running a high performance team, his forecasting was often inaccurate and done on a whiteboard. And so that was when we decided to bring the kind of forecasting acumen, essentially, that exists in many sectors, particularly the financial sector, into the world of B2B organizations.
Great. Okay, that's, yeah. Look, you probably see a whiteboard behind me, so... Very familiar, although, when it's just one person, it's slightly easier to forecast, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we should get straight into this. Why is forecasting so hard, even in well-run businesses? I've been in those as well, and again, the whiteboards do still exist. Why is it misunderstood? And I having a look at your LinkedIn as well, you've sort of a little anecdote there around forecasting is like playing the stock market. It is really difficult.
Absolutely. So I could talk about this for many hours, but I think I'll just cover 2 points. The first point would be when it comes to particularly private equity backed organizations, particularly if they've been growing inorganically through acquisitions, etc. The data gets more and more complex. So even if you've only got one system, you've often got plenty of standard objects, custom fields, rules, formulas, validations. The company may have been restructured over time, and the meaning of certain sales stages, certain types of reporting, etc., all gets changed and reformatted. But furthermore, as a company gets older and as it grows inorganically, they've often got multiple systems, multiple CRMs reporting for what used to be different companies and is now different products within a roll-up company, ERPs, data backed up into data warehouses, etc. And so having multiple systems and connecting them is hard enough, but actually having one central place that's always live at runtime 24/7 is extremely difficult. And so that is the main reason why forecasting and even just reporting is very hard, because you've got multiple moving parts all changing all the time, and you have to bring them all together, which is why A, it's hard, and B, it's often done with a pretty material time lag. And for reporting, the time lag is annoying, but for forecasting, it actually by definition makes the very forecast you've been creating even less accurate the longer the lag has been. So from the more technical side, that's one of the big challenges. You obviously need a really comprehensive, essentially data cube that's connected live all the time, and also augmented with all the trends and insights that you need as well. But on the other side of things, what's really interesting about this specific problem is that the definition of a forecast and the definition of different types of forecast and the incentives behind it are very different depending on the stakeholder, even within a company. So a CFO might be wanting a forecast that is the maximum number that you're 95% confident you won't go below, and you essentially run your cash flow off of that. Salesperson or someone in the commercial team might have some sort of bias to be anchoring their forecast near their target or their quota, even if there isn't the empirical evidence to underpin that, whether that be historic pipeline generation performance or current pipeline or current deals that they're running. And so that's the first step. But then secondly, when you really drill into a forecast, what does it mean to have a best case forecast or a commit forecast, or optimistic or cautious forecast essentially? The very specific definitions of those is often not clearly defined. So even when a large amount of work is going into it, you can find that all the people saying different numbers with all different meanings between them. And the real problem there is when that's presented to the board and when there's the strategic discussion around it, it becomes very, very difficult to actually make those decisions.
Yeah, and as you're certainly the front page of your website talks about PE grade forecasting. Can you just give us a bit of an understanding there of what you mean by that? But also in terms of also the change, are there changing expectations as well around forecasting now? Is there more expectation on the PortCos to have that up and running?
Absolutely. So regarding the whole private equity grade forecasting, if something within business or business operations is private equity grade, it's essentially the top tier that you can get as expected by a top tier private equity fund. And so when you look back to the private equity model, let's say they invest or buy out a company, they will have a value creation plan over a period of time, let's say 5 years, and they need to get the transaction done, get in there, and they've got a timeline, whether it be through technology or across the people or across the strategy of the business, and they need to roll that out in phases, and furthermore, just as importantly, be reporting on it so that you can ensure that every part of your value creation plan is on track, and if it's not on track, you can jump on it as quickly as possible. Because the private equity game is all about IRR. So with any phase that is delayed, you're therefore creating a downstream effect for all the other phases of the value creation plan in terms of slowing that down. The result of that would be a lower IRR essentially. So when we talk about private equity grade forecasting, what we mean is the most resilient, robust, and comprehensive forecasting solution you could get, where every number, furthermore, is backed by empirical evidence and reportable on. So you can see the number, but also understand why. So when it comes to forecasting, your number is 10 million, and that is based on these pieces of empirical evidence. You've closed X, your pipeline generation is Y, there might be a new marketing campaign coming out, etc., underpinned by facts. But with any other part of reporting or forecasting, it's always backed by the KPIs they need to make sure everything's on track for their broader plan.
And so, obviously, we're getting close to the solution here with Kluster. What are you doing differently that hasn't sort of existed previously? And obviously, we're going to talk about how and you've been running for nearly 10 years now. It's not like it's the generative AI piece that's enabled you necessarily, but it'd be good to hear how is that supporting the proposition, the product.
Absolutely. So what makes us different is that there are plenty of players in the market on the sales intelligence side, and on the other side there's plenty in the kind of office of the CFO space across FP&A and much more. Now, a lot of these vendors in the market are kind of software or SaaS solutions that either sit on data or they process data to go in and then report back on it or do something else on it, coming back out like a workflow. Now, Kluster is a enterprise data company essentially. So we deploy it as a solution because, as everyone knows, forecasting and reporting isn't just a technology fix. If you've got sporadic data systems all over your company, all over the world, you can't just get a SaaS platform and plug it into them and it works. So what makes us different is that we connect all the CRMs, the ERPs, marketing system, data warehouse, etc., and work with the team. Members of the Kluster team will work with our customer to ensure that all the business logic, all the taxonomy is centralized, aligned, in line with what the board wants, what the CFO wants, and what the private equity sponsor wants as well. And we pull the data together, we clean it, we make sure that it's all live 24/7, and then we amplify it over 1,000 times. So once it's pulled together into one central, essentially, data cube, we can explode it with every insight, every risk, every opportunity, and every trend across your organization. And only once we've done that, you can then layer on top your historic reporting. We can do your bookings, your revenue recognition, forecasting across every product line. But you can't do any of that if your data is in different siloed systems. And so we're the only vendor on the market, we're the only solution on the market doing what we do in our space. And that's what makes us different. And going to your AI question, we've been first since the beginning. As you mentioned, 5+ years ago, it was more machine learning, and then neural networks, etc., came out. We very heavily leveraged that side of things. But similarly, you can only get real value out of machine learning and AI if your data is clean and in a great place and as up to date as possible. And it depends on the use case. So if you're looking at trends, we use the most advanced libraries to spot risks in deals, in entire cohorts of pipeline across any part of your business, and alert those to you. And when it comes to the more LM side of things, we are investing heavily in essentially using that both in the data, but also in the user experience. So obviously, throughout the Kluster application, the end user will be able to query the data, talk to the data, and find out everything they need to know to make the decisions as quickly as possible, as soon as possible.
The PortCos are diverse, aren't they?
Mm.
And the discussion that we had just last week at the breakfast briefing I host was around data foundations, and the importance of that, and something that's been asked for. I'm sure you get to see a lot of good and not so good levels of data sort of management. Is that a big issue? Is that one of the blockers to really sort of getting good forecasting, or indeed your solution? Do they need to be a certain level to even sort of get to the point where they're able to plug in what you do?
No, there's no certain level. So when it comes to what Kluster does, common objection is our data's not ready, or our sales reps, our account execs and account managers are only filling out 3 fields and they should be filling out 20 per deal. The reality is that if you're the end user or sales leader, or someone within the company, you might go into your CRM and look at the deal and see 3 fields, and you might say, right, you've got the stage, you've got the close date, which is too optimistic. It should be further back. You've got the amount, which is probably too optimistic as well. It's probably too high because there'll be some discounting going on, etc. So you'd look at that and think, well, our data isn't ready yet. But going back to the point on the reality is that if a sales rep has been running a large deal, a 6 or maybe 7-figure deal, and it's been going on for 6+ months, they will have created the opportunity or the deal 6+ months ago. And every call, every email they've made is a touch point on that timeline. Every time they update the close date or the amount or whatever it might be and click save, that is another data point on the timeline. So instead of having 3 data points that you might think may not be very accurate, we might have 300, 600+ data points in a time series for a single deal. And at private equity scale, there are obviously a pretty substantial number of deals, substantial amount of pipeline. We can aggregate that and then build out time series across every part of the pipeline too. So when it comes to what we do, any private equity scale company will always have enough data. We've never come across a company that didn't. But in terms of a recommendation more broadly, it would always be to get started and simplify things. Quite often, an instinct would be to define a complex data set and make it even more complex by adding more fields or tables or views or whatever you might be doing. And that actually has the opposite effect.
Just before we get into some of what you've been seeing in the trillions of data points, sales data points, are you seeing a change in behavior around the data that's being captured and the importance of that data once you've come on board and they're starting to see these insights?
Absolutely. I think to preempt that, when it comes to use cases for AI broadly, I'd say there are kind of 2 buckets, one of which is to make an existing workflow or process much more efficient, and another one would be to gain an edge. Now Kluster's position is to gain an edge. We give you your numbers and your forecasts and your insights much earlier. A very large proportion of the market is in automating away or accelerating workflows. And particularly with people in a commercial team, a huge amount of the AI is all around the call recording, the conversation intelligence, cadences of emails, etc., drafting the emails for you and making that much faster. And so the prevalence of these products and features across the sales intelligence market means that as every quarter goes by, there's more and more data in their systems, and that's not necessarily because the team have become more adept at filling out their CRM. It's simply because these new features and products are automating it for them. So there is more and more data, and it is increasingly clean and in a better format, and that's how the market's moving forward, essentially.
So do you have like a sort of an ideal tech stack that would just mean then that the quality of the data you're inputting is like a gold standard?
It's an interesting point. I think what's going on at the market right now, particularly with what I just mentioned, is we will be moving towards large enterprise deals for these tools. But right now, there are a lot of up-and-coming new tools, and the sales team will be putting it on their company credit card for $9.99 per month, whatever it might be. So you might have multiple people using different things, and whatever they feel accelerates their work and helps them perform better is what works. I think as AI has, or the applied part of AI, particularly in the commercial space of the companies we work with, as it moves forward, it is a bit more commoditized than technology might have been 5 to 10 years ago. So there are companies that have come out of the blocks extremely quickly, solving for one particular use case, whether it be in making a call and sending an email or answering a question or customer support. And they've come out of the blocks very quickly and scaled to a very material point. But equally, I think the flip side of that is the potential for churn and swapping out could be higher as well, because they're leveraging the new AI models, all of which would be, off of the back of OpenAI or any of the others like that too. So to answer your question, I wouldn't say an ideal tech stack for them, because the data is all recorded and put in the same format. So I would always recommend keeping things as lightweight as possible, have one clean data system, and as long as whatever's pushing into the data system is in a consistent format, then it'll always work.
Yeah, I was just going to say about standardization, and that must be really difficult right now. There's the amount of tools on smarket.
Absolutely.
We're going back to I mentioned that you've analysed a lot of sales data. What sort of patterns are surprising you that you think, it'd be useful for the audience here?
Yeah, sure. So one main point that jumps out across almost every company that we work with and across everyone I'm talking to is deals taking longer than expected and the market not catching up to that when it comes to their forecasts. And this also overlaps with what I mentioned at the beginning around people having different semantics and different taxonomy for what they're describing. So you could have a chief sales officer or a VP sales saying, right, I've got these 10 deals and they're all in commit, and I'm saying I'm 90%. I'm going to give them 90 or 95% confidence they're going to happen and they're going to close. Now, what the data says is the percentage of those deals that slip to subsequent quarters has quadrupled in the past 2 years. Wow. So when the market really started to kind of plateau and then contract, I guess starting in very late 2022 and then into and across 2023 and beyond. What really happened when we were in the sales cycles is mostly near the end of the sales cycles. The procurement team is taking longer. The CFO is getting more and more involved. There's more and more budget constraints. People are pushing things further back. They're asking for higher discounts. There's more and more hurdles, particularly with selling internationally around barriers such as tariffs more recently, etc. And so what we see is a deal appears to be moving at the speed it always has done for the past 10 years. And then once you're 80% in, the remaining 20% will take 4 times as long as it has before. And so that is a trend we've seen absolutely everywhere. And the big problem there is obviously you could get to the end of the year and the VP of sales says, well, I told you I was right, because 90% of those deals do actually close. But the CFO would come back and say, well, only half of them closed in the quarter that you said they would. And then for example, our new business revenue was half or less than half of what we needed. Having that open conversation and making sure that everyone's sure that when they say 90%, they mean in general, or do they mean within the exact financial reporting period you're talking about. And that is across the board. It's kind of plateaued now and people are just about getting to grips with it. But that's the kind of thing that sounds like it's not that big a problem. But the actual impact on the revenue performance of a business is absolutely huge. It's one of the biggest drivers of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I assume this gives, well, obviously more confidence around the data points, but having more open conversations about this too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we're working with a company, as mentioned, we pull all the data together and then amplify it with all the insights and risks and opportunities. And so the second we spot a risk that this might be happening, the deal might be decelerating, there's fewer touch points on the deal across a week, we can then compare it with other deals selling the same product, potentially with the same sales rep, or maybe a better sales rep who can get deals done faster for the same product. And you can say, oh, well, actually, the ideal path for this deal would be to have 4 stakeholders involved at the prospect, and you've only got 2. You don't have the CFO involved yet. You should proactively pull them in rather than hope they don't get pulled in by the other prospect, etc. So we listen out for the signals that this is happening, and then compare against the deals that did work out, and then find the path to get there as quickly as possible.
Okay. Look, I've worked in a number of PE-backed companies, but still PE is relatively new to me. So when we've got this forecasting tool, and obviously this is not a concept around forecasting, the dynamic between the private equity firm themselves and the PortCo. We obviously normally have somebody sitting on the board from the PE firm. I'm just wondering how the dynamic is there, and whether there is almost like a dashboard purely for the PE firm themselves, and how they are looking to access this information more regularly, or hopefully that they have something like this across the whole PortCo. Yeah, I'm just wondering a little bit more, trying to understand that piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we would recommend, and works well, obviously depending on the culture of the business and what people choose to do, is that the dashboard is essentially the same from the board all the way down to the most junior sales rep, but obviously the data going into it is different, or a subset of the top level. And what you get when that is up and running is really fantastic. You get these kind of water cooler moments, or coffee machine moments, essentially, where the CEO or someone from the board can be talking to one of the junior sales reps and say, right, these are the top 3 KPIs we care about. What are you on? And at the company, you might want 10,000 leads, whatever it is, and the salesperson wants 200. It's a much smaller number, but the KPIs are identical themselves. The way they're calculated are identical, and the cadence at which they're reported over, whether it be weekly, monthly, or quarterly, is identical too. So that's a very powerful thing to do. But in practice, some people prefer to not do that. And at the private equity level, we've seen it be really powerful when you standardize the reporting KPIs. So we can add on a layer on top of how the PortCo operates to essentially translate the numbers and the taxonomy into such the portfolio can say, right, these X companies are all running on Kluster. What is their high, medium, low forecast? What are these KPIs versus plan? Are we on track to be deploying the next phase of our value creation plan as well? And then that helps massively with their portfolio operations. And as mentioned, at the end of the day, everything's an IRR game. So the faster you can get these things done, the faster you can move on to the next step, and you can get to where you need to be.
You find it that, I mean, it'd be good to talk through, if possible, obviously not naming no names, but how that insight is sort of given private equity sort of a case to, I suppose, potentially put more capability, resource into a firm because they're seeing something with this data.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not actually creating a decision and an action as a result of the forecast, you're obviously not getting the vast majority of the value of it. So with our customers, we add an average of 2 months visibility. And what that means is 93% of the market only get confident 1 to 2 weeks before the end of the quarter, whereas with Kluster, it's within the first few weeks of the quarter they get confident. And so what that means is most businesses will get to the end of the quarter, they will realize, as is often the case, that they're going to miss quota by 5, 10, maybe 20+%. And then only at that point, they have to be replanning when it's far too late, because their recurring revenue is lower, their balance sheet is weaker, etc. And then they might have to downgrade their future projections too. Whereas if you're running on Kluster, then you're 2 weeks into the quarter and we can say these two teams are going to miss their quota by 50%. And the reason for that is because they've got plenty of pipeline, but it's spread too thinly, or it's spread at the top of the funnel rather than the middle and the lower part of the funnel, or these reps are going to miss quota, etc. And once you get that information, what happens is you can pull in the top performing sales reps to help close the deals, make sure they close on time without discount, or you can reallocate the deals where you need to be. You can level up the reps that are forecasted to not perform so well, or you can move on from them. But either way, when you get to the end of the quarter, 2+ months later, you're more than twice as likely to hit target. So our customers outperform the market by 103%, so over double in terms of attaining quota. And so that's turning the forecast into action. You've got 2 months warning, you know exactly what to do, and you're not retrospectively having to cut costs, downgrade your projections, etc. You take those actions before the bad event actually happens.
Well, that sounds like something that I'm sure those listening to now want to achieve. But what could they do you think, right now to raise their forecasting game?
So right now, if you literally had to start right now and raise the game, I would say, firstly, define what each word means. If you've got a commit forecast and the best case forecast, etc., what does that actually mean? Every deal that's in commit should have a fixed criteria. Now that can be different per business, but what's really important is it's identical across every deal that's in commit. And the same with best case. Every single deal across the entire organization should have an exact same meaning. The meaning of a forecast should be identical between the CFO and the CRO or VP of sales, so that everyone's talking about the same number. You're not talking about a conservative estimate or a higher number, etc. So once you've got that out of the way, which surprisingly is prevalent across companies in the market, and that's fine. They just need to sort it out, which is quick to do. The next step would be to start with multiple simple forecasts rather than building one big complex one. And what's really powerful about this is if you base them on empirical evidence, like actual facts that no one can deny, and then calculate the number a lot more frequently and a lot earlier than you would be comfortable doing, you actually converge towards an extremely accurate number pretty quickly. So what I mean by that, you might have a stage weighted forecast, say how much pipeline have I got at every stage that's closing this quarter and next quarter, get the conversion rate per stage, account for slippage, and then just have that number and snapshot that number. You might update that once a week or even once a day, then do the same separately, maybe using your capacity, so the headcount of your team, and have multiple models. We've got some templates on our website to help with this, but essentially a big problem people have is they only submit a forecast when they're confident in it, and they're only confident in it when it's far too late. So the person submitting it is by definition almost doing themselves out of a job, because by the time it's far too late, the CFO could have ballparked that number in their head anyway. Whereas if you sit there and say 4 months out, right, if our headcount is going to be X in 4 months, if our pipeline is going to be Y, and assuming the demand generation is anywhere between 10 and 20, spread is this. And even if you give a big spread with a big deviation, you say, given the evidence at hand, this is what the outcome's going to be. And if you're really relaying that information every week up the chain of command, that becomes really powerful very quickly.
What's going to happen next then in terms of forecasting? What's your view on the future there? And are we getting to the stage where we're thinking, a fully autonomous state?
It's moving in that direction, certainly. I think that'll make a lot of people happy. All the people have to pull together a forecast. It's a thankless task to spend lots of time doing something that's guaranteed to be wrong. But essentially, the perfect solution, looking into the future, is a solution where every number is at your fingertips live, and every single number is based on empirical evidence. So you can essentially ask the system, what is going to happen to product line B in the United States over the next 6 months? And it would just come back and say, right, the spread is between this and this. The big needle movers are these 3 enterprise deals. Your sales rep just got off a call with the prospect 3 minutes ago, and the call recording implied that it's moving forward, but they haven't updated the CRM yet, etc., etc. But you can ask them any question about any part of your commercial, any part of your company, and the answer would be there live and in real time. I think in terms of autonomous, there's both the information and gaining the edge, which is very powerful, but there's also the workflow of sales reps managing their deals, managing their pipeline, the sales leaders managing their deals and their pipeline. And having that operational cadence is very important, not just for the forecast accuracy that it delivers, but also it's very tightly aligned with the operational cadence that private equity like to roll out. post-transaction. So at the very beginning, you said, what does private equity grade actually mean? The reality is when you've got the value creation plan, you've got the people plan, the technology plan, and all these other plans, it will be almost a spreadsheet or a table or a grid or a Gantt chart over time. Are we moving in the right direction? Is the one-to-one meeting happening every day or week or month? And what was the output? Is that red, amber, green? If you've just got a dashboard of red, amber, green of what's happening, it becomes very powerful. And so if you think back to the kind of more workflow side that AI enables, a forecast meeting could be the AI says, right, the empirical evidence says boom, 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 boom. This is your leads, this is your pipeline, this is your demand generation, there's a marketing campaign or there's an event happening in 2 days. We expect that the pipeline created to be X. We believe that your forecast should be between 8 and 10. What do you believe? And I've drafted some notes for you, but also want your input too. Having that cadence from the people is very powerful, just as any organization, whether you're in business, you're in the military or otherwise, it's still a very important workflow that can be augmented by.
And the expectation on that commercial leader is going to be going up, isn't it, essentially?
Absolutely. But I think this is really powerful for commercial leaders, because at the moment, the reason why they have the tendency sometimes to submit a higher number that's close to their target or to their plan is because you don't want to go to your CEO or your CFO and say, right, I'm forecasting I'm going to miss. But actually, if you've got the evidence, then you can very aggressively go back, and it actually helps everyone, and say, my pipeline is X, my qualified pipeline is Y, marketing demand generation is diminishing, and we've got 2 fewer people in my team than we'd initially planned. All else being equal, I can't possibly hit the number that you also asked me to hit. These are your 3 options: hire X people, spend X on marketing, or downgrade the plan, etc. And then everyone very quickly gets to a strategic conversation on what to do as quickly as possible, rather than different people floating around different numbers, which are then proven to be incorrect many months later, and then the IRR of the investment collapses.
Just circling back in terms of your where you started in your career around risk, and like every day there's something happening in the world that has some impact. Do you look at external factors as well within the forecasting and to support, a company that could be very close to getting a deal and then disruption happens?
Absolutely. We bake in data. It's very much driven by the internal data of the company, but we can augment with benchmark data across the sectors, and then looking forward we will be incorporating macro data too. But I think what's really important is no matter how far you move forward with this, if you present a number and then the evidence, the CEO or the CFO or the private equity sponsor or people on the board will be looking at the company and looking at the numbers and saying, I know that I'm actually thinking about hiring X more people or opening an office here or cutting costs there or whatever it might be. There's always going to be information that isn't in the data set, which is what makes the empirical evidence, or scientifically speaking, the assumptions. You say, these are my assumptions, this is the number. The person reading it can say, right, 4 of those 5 assumptions are correct, but 1's wrong, because I know I'm going to do something else in the future that no one else knows because I haven't written it down or put it in a database. Going back to your point, we do augment it with a lot of other data, both for forecasting, but also benchmarking against the market, how you perform against your peers. But at the end of the day, it's the human that needs to have the accountability and responsibility. So we present all the findings in a clear way back to them.
That's a really fascinating conversation, an area I don't think gets enough airtime. And I think that this will be a case in point that we should probably do this again at some point. It certainly has a major impact on value creation. So thank you for your time. In the show notes, I will make sure that we have a link to Kluster and yourself on LinkedIn so people can get in touch. But for now, thank you, Dan, for your time, and I'll see everyone again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve.